Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to get started because we've got a lot to cover today. This is April 26, 2019, NEWA State Coordinators Meeting. I just want to give a quick reminder that all recordings, hopefully as long as my technology works, are going to be available at this URL here. If anybody can't see my screen share, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll just move right through this. We also have the upcoming meeting schedule. There have been a couple of new items that I need to talk about that came up this week. And so I'm just going to jump right into those. I learned on Tuesday that Terrence Robinson here at Cornell has put out some updates to the apple carbohydrate thinning model. And I understand that might seem a bit of a surprise, but I want to explain what Keith Eggleston and I have done, and I'll just show you in a visual. So if we go here to the NEWA website, first thing I'll point out is that our maps aren't loading properly. NRCC folks know about that, and are looking into what the problem is. But to get back on topic, with the apple carbohydrate model, you know, there are folks within the NEWA network who are already well underway with their growing season. So what Keith and I did, if you go to crop management where you normally access these tools, you're going to see we still have the existing carbohydrate model in place, and that's not going to change for this growing season. It was very important to me that we not just completely switch over. But to meet everyone else's needs, you know, growers in New York, Massachusetts, whoever, who are interested in trying out the new model, just this morning, Keith put this link in. So if you click on this link, you're going to see that the model has a slightly different look and feel. And we can disregard this. The models all should still be working, even though the maps aren't. So if you still go ahead and select a station of your choice and hit continue, you're going to see a couple of things are different. And I'm still familiarizing myself with this as well. But you'll see that this option has been added. We'll walk through this in a second, but I also want to mention Julie and Mario Sazo with the Lake Ontario Fruit Program and myself put up a blog article this morning to go along with this release. It explains some of the finer details, but let's just hit calculate to see what the similarities and differences are. So assuming you've chosen your percent flowering spurs, these columns right here look similar to what we had before. Keith, I don't know if you're online, but if you are, please jump in at any point because I'm certainly not familiar with this new layout, but I'm just describing it.
Okay, yeah, I'm on the line, so.
Okay, great. Yeah, why don't you jump in here? I don't want to mumble through this.
No, well, you're doing a good job so far.
Okay.
But yeah, the first three columns are exactly the same: maximum temperature and solar radiation. Under the carbohydrate balance columns, there used to be production and demand. Those have been removed. I guess Terrence didn't feel that they were essential for being able to use the model. So those two columns are removed. The daily thinning is the next column that was there before. That's still there. It used to be a 4-day average that was used. That's an average of the daily thinning values. So it used to be a 4-day average, the current day plus 3 days into the future. He changed that to be a 7-day average. So it's the current day, the 2 previous days, and 4 days into the future. So there's a change there. The next column, accumulated 4 degrees C degree days since bloom. That is a new column that was added. That's a new component of the model that Terrence added. And then the next column is the thinning recommendation, which you had before, but it is now color-coded to reflect the possible risk of overthinning if you follow the recommendations. So if you scroll down a little bit, you see there are a few recommendations. You see that there's a color, so these are all good. And the other change is that the text in all but the first and last columns is color coded as well. And if you scroll down to the bottom, Dan, below the table, you'll see that there's a key for that where the text color represents the expected thinning efficacy. And so it's the way that we're showing that. So the model has been changed. Parent says that he's improved it. A lot of things that he's been working on over the last year are incorporated in it now. And I think that he has talked to some groups about it, but I'm not exactly sure which groups he's talked to.
So in New York, he's touched base, I think, with all of the Apple production regions and during our winter conferences. I know from other conversations with a few state coordinators, he's been down south. So I'm not exactly sure where else outside of New York besides that he's shared this information. But again, if you go to the NEWA blog, actually, why don't I just open it? Because we can go over some of those details. Well, we don't have to go over the details. I just want to show you what kind of information is going to be in there. Yeah, so this is the most recent post, just went out this morning. I'll scroll right down to the bottom. This just reiterates for our growers who I haven't been able to reach out to yet that the existing model is still in place and it will be in place for the rest of this season. In 2020, I think there's agreement that everything will be transitioned, but for this year, we have a little bit of time. So what I wanted to point out right here is that Mario Sazos, I guess, spoke with Terrence and highlighted some of the changes, and I think Keith mentioned some of them. But again, just for the purposes of sharing with this group so everyone's aware, that's where we're at. And again, if you just click there, you'll see the original model. And it still works exactly the same way. So if anybody needs a transition period, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I see John Clements had a couple of things, a couple of questions in the chat. He asked if all the user entered data is going to be saved for later sessions. And yes, it will be. The green tip date, the bloom date, and the percent flowering spurs will all be saved for future sessions. And he says you've got temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit and degrees C, 4 degrees for degree days on the same screen. And that's right, all the model calculations are actually done in degrees C, but we thought that users were more familiar with degrees Fahrenheit, so that's why it's converted for the tables that you see on the page.
Great. Thanks, Keith. Okay. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going. This is something I got a request just yesterday to ask about. We've got a lot going on, no dates or times or anything, but where our discussion is regarding virtual stations. And so I guess to approach this without putting any sort of time frame or thinking of resources, the first question that comes to mind, Keith, maybe you can provide a little bit of insight, is do we have the pieces of technology in place? Again, forget about a timeline, but do we have the pieces of technology in place to be able to do something like virtual stations with the models we have right now? Understanding that we're in the middle of a website rebuild, we're finishing integration with Onset and whatnot, but just, I think as a group, if we have an understanding of what's realistic, would this be a medium term or a long-term goal? Do you have any insights on that, Keith?
I think it would be maybe a medium-term goal.
Yeah, of course.
Right now we have like the gridded temperature and precipitation. We have that in place for the for current and historical data. We don't have gridded forecast data readily available to NEWA yet. We're working on that. And the other thing would be the variables like relative humidity. We don't have that in a gridded form yet either, or solar radiation. So there's still some work that needs to be done. That process is, well, we're actually working on it right now, but I'm not sure when it will actually be ready yet. But it is something that all the pieces are things that we're working on.
Okay, great. I think that'll be helpful, just to know in general. Okay, moving on to weather station updates. So Onset has finished their work with being able to onboard RX3000 weather stations. So we've got a bunch queued up right now. Like I said, there's still some steps behind the scenes that need to take place, but we're very close. Again, NRCC folks, if you want to add anything there, that's fine. But I feel like we're in a pretty good place on that, and there's been a lot of work been put into getting this new vendor on board. Now, one of the things I'd like to do personally is just compile all the resources that Onset has put together. So they came up with their own NEWA brochure. They've got a corporate partners landing page for NEWA. They have a designated sales contact. So all sorts of stuff that has been being put together up to this point is ready to be shared. And so within the next couple of business days, that is my number one priority, is to get word out. Now, the official line, or the official standpoint I'm going to have now that we're working with two vendors, is that the potential NEWA user needs to do their own research, basically. So reach out to the companies, find out what the pros and cons are of each system, and so on and so forth. I know NEWA state coordinators have their own preferences. I'll admit that I have my own preferences, but from a public standpoint, I want to avoid conveying, I guess, a bias, because I think there are important pros and cons in terms of price point, in terms of station replacement and things like that. I guess I'll just leave it there. But I'm glad we have two weather station options at this point. For rain-wise, I've been working with Ralph. Let's see, what is it, April? In March, I went through and I tagged all of the stations that are not deactivated but are inactive in New York and in a couple of other key areas, stations that have had long-standing problems. And through the help desk, I sent out notifications saying you need to consider maintenance or replacement. I'm closing out a lot of those. I don't know exactly who responded. That's been an area where follow-up communication hasn't been great. But there have been some people, a couple of nice surprises where maybe the grower or the station owner had expressed a lot of frustration in the past, but they're back online now. Another point I want to clarify, so people's experiences have probably been different, or maybe you haven't had to have this discussion with Rainwise support, but a couple of times now it's popped up where Rainwise says, well, NEWA and Rainwise have a 5-year replacement policy. This has been a very confusing situation for me because in 2007, I had this discussion with Rainwise support person, and they said, well, probably 6 years. And so I started out by saying that, but then they changed staff, and then it changed to 5 years. But basically, I'm trying to do the best I can to follow what, they have their own business practices and policies, and I don't feel that I'm in a position where I can say, no, 5 years is unreasonable, it needs to be 7 years. This is just one of many pain points, I'll just be completely honest, that have come up. And so it's been a very confusing situation. Beginning next year, I'm just going to, you know, if they recommend 5 years, that's what I'm going to share with people. And I'm not sure I really have anything else I can think of regarding that situation.
Dan, this is Cheryl. I have a question regarding that. So if
Yeah.
the stations are older than 5 years, and of course, all of us on this call know the situation. We don't have a lot of money to replace stations every 5 years. Much of this has been obtained through grants. So if we do not replace the stations after their 5 years, are they going to not service and offer assistance with those stations that are older than 5 years?
Honestly, I think that would be a really bad move on their part.
Yeah, me too.
I you know, we're in a group. I'll just be completely honest. This has been really frustrating for me, and I don't understand decisions that are made. So it's put me in a very awkward position since I've started. I think we're moving forward, and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer than that. I can reinforce the fact to Ralph that, you know, you need to continue. So if the customer wants to continue servicing it, you should continue servicing it. And I also need to clarify the fact that it's not our NEWA rain-wise policy that you replace it at 5 years. I need to reinforce the fact that I'm following your guidance because it's your guidance. And, you know, I need to say it in a slightly different way than that. But I wish I had better answers. So, if I could just go back to onset for a second, on a slightly more positive note, I want to put the idea out there to invite onset to one of these meetings so that you can all interact with them directly. When I started the process, Jamie Pierce, Vice President of Marketing and Sales, was my point of contact, and for a couple months he stepped back and someone else was involved. But he's now back in that same position, and I think it would be great if we could invite him or someone he could designate to just introduce themselves and talk about what they've done so far regarding NEWA involvement with NEWA. So unless, you know, you can reply offline, unless anybody thinks that's not a good idea, I'll give him a couple of upcoming dates and see if we can get them involved. I think that would be really great. Okay. Okay, on to the website rebuild. Julie, Carol, and I have been working the past, gosh, it's almost 3 months now. We've gone through all the content on the website, and the current website, we call it architecture because that's the jargon, but basically how the website is set up. And for this initial step, we've been working primarily with our CIT UX person to provide some guidance about how the new information architecture, this is very basic, you know, site layout stuff. It's not what is the content, it's not how is the site going to look, it's literally where is such and such a page going to go. We are circling the drain on that. I have one last meeting with them on Tuesday to talk about that part, and then once I get that final feedback, I'm really excited to, you know, NRCC is going to come in, and as a full group, we're going to look at user testing of our models to say, okay, how exactly are these going to work? You know, with work that's already been done, Julie just put up a new blueberry maggot model, which is available from the pest management drop-down menu. It has a very different look and feel, and significant work has gone into that. So that's going to be a starting point for user testing. Some of you may have already been contacted. Julie and I chose another subgroup of our advisory committee to provide feedback. But that's the next big step. And so, you know, it's down to it at this point. Things are going to move quickly because we need to really start working on the actual build. One other thing I want to mention for the website rebuild is that we're going to have a system in place where we've got regional content. So maybe this is, for example, if I am in Pennsylvania, if I'm accessing a weather station in Pennsylvania, it would be really great on that weather station page to see Pennsylvania resources. So we are putting a system in place, and I'm going to reach out to each of you individually with a list of things that we've pulled off of the current website to just say, what do you think of this list? Are there other things we can include, and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to think if there's anything about website rebuild at the moment. No, only that we're going to be moving forward within the next week as a full group. That is NYS IPM, NRCC, and Cornell Information Technologies together. For weather station onboarding, at this point, I have combined all of the different forms. So they used to be paper forms. You filled out the form, you would send the PDF for the Word document to me or to maybe Nicole Mattoon or Julie in the past. Everything is combined into this single access point now. If you have an opportunity in the future to go through it, you're going to see that it's not just a standard form. Depending on certain selections, like what weather station company you purchase from, once you identify what that company is, the rest of the fields are going to be customized only to that company. Also, if you are replacing a station at an existing location, that form, once you indicate that, the form will change so that you don't have to re-enter certain pieces of information that have already been added. How are we doing on time? 9:22. Okay. One of the action items I had from our last meeting, again, I'll probably have to follow up offline to continue this, but one of the tasks that we all thought would be really useful was to summarize the help desk topics that I had to address last year through Zendesk. I thought it was really, really interesting to see what the patterns were, and I shared I believe I shared maybe the top 10 list. I can't remember at this point, but just to go through them quickly, you're going to see that the #1 issue was station hardware. And I'm not going to rehash it. I think we all know what that situation was. But that by far, I mean, that, almost by a factor of 3, that outpaced station onboarding. So this in itself is encouraging. 60 new onboards. Some station hardware questions, maybe there was some overlap, but then once we get down below that, RimPro is an unrelated decision support tool that's online, rimpro.eu, but a lot of growers in New York and Massachusetts like to use this alongside NEWA just as an extra source of information. So RimPro licenses, basically Keith at NRCC sets up an access point where people can use NEWA data in this platform. So that's what that was. We had 41 requests. We collect a small fee to cover our costs, and so on and so forth. Next one above that was a website Apple models. There were a couple of variations on this, but basically it was, I like to see this as a positive negative, but so many people are using our Apple models that every once in a while the servers would clog up a bit. But in each of these cases, I felt like we were very much more on top of it in 2018. And maybe that's because I was so new in 2017, but these were all resolved pretty quickly. We had 20 just general join NEWA requests and so on and so forth. What I'd like to do for each of these probably is just I'll draft like a 1-paragraph summary of what to do, like an FAQ list is what I have in mind. Thinking of just writing a paragraph and maybe share it with the group for some general feedback, and I can just put it up somewhere so that folks who are looking for information who maybe haven't reached out yet, maybe we can tackle their question proactively. So that's what I'd like to do with that.
Dan, this is Cheryl again. That seems like a great idea. And then when you're finished kind of talking about this, I do have a question about some issues that I think are coming up not infrequently with the stations. So
Okay.
I'll let you finish that and then we can talk about
Yep.
that later.
Touch real quickly on how I handle these inquiries. At this point, I'm a year and a half into the help desk, and there are definitely patterns emerging. Part of it was through this, but I've developed standardized responses that I'll customize a little bit, maybe if it's in one of these top 10 questions, and that just saves me some times. And so there's like maybe one or two pieces of like a certain workflow that I see emerging, and it just saves me time in the long run with that. And I already talked about next step. So I think that's all I've got for today. So Cheryl, if you want to bring up your question discussion.
Okay, so one of the questions I have is so last year I had a weather station that the reed switch and the rain gauge went out. Luckily, I had a station that had been damaged, and I had bought a new station and replaced that station. So I was able to take the repaired station and switch it out with the other station. In all honesty, I still haven't put the new reed switch in that I purchased, put in the station. Ralph said pretty easy to do, so I hadn't done it yet. I've got another station now that is just getting totally erroneous weather data. And then I just looked, and I've got another station, which is actually the brand new station that was put up last year to replace the one that got damaged. And that does not seem to be recording correctly. So I don't know if there's like a real issue with these rain gauge reed switches or the rain gauges themselves. I know sometimes the rain gauge goes a little nuts if we have high wind because, it's shaking or moving. But even when we've got calm weather and it should be recording rain, sometimes we're not. And then other times it's just stopping at 0.1 inches of rain and it's staying steady at that. So I'm not quite sure what's wrong. I'm going to get a hold of Ralph and try and go through some of these. But right now it appears to be that there's probably at least 2 stations with a history of 3 and possibly a 4th station that are having issues with these rain gauges. And that's a pretty damn critical bit of information for our models.
Yeah. Okay. I think you should reach out, but I will talk to Ralph about this as well and ask him if I'll try and get additional information about this. I'll ask him about, and I don't know what your conversations have been with him.
Not a lot right now to this point. Not to do with the rain gauges at all. I haven't contacted him. So if you want to give me a week or so to chat with him, that's fine. But I know that I'm going to have to go out at least one of my stations right now and replace that reed switch because it's been a couple months that it's been acting up, and I just don't want to wait that much longer on it. It's just trying to get the time to get out there to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do think it's something I need to follow up with him on.
I don't know if anybody else is having problems with rain gauges at all that seem to have erroneous data. So
does anybody else have thoughts on this? I know the issues are out there. If not among this group, some growers who just own their own station have had trouble.
I just remember, this is Melanie. I remember Tim telling me when I first started on this system that you had to be really careful with the rain buckets, that that they're tipping properly, and so I don't know if that's a same issue, but that's the only thing I've heard about those.
I know with the installations I've done, when we replaced our Rainwise station at the end of 2017, I put it up and there was a slight issue, so I ended up taking a level out just to make sure. It didn't seem to be very far off, but I double checked it, and then.
Sorry, Dan, can you just speak up a little bit, please?
Sure. Yeah. So we had to replace a Rainwise station here in Geneva, and when I replaced it, I know that at first the rain readings seemed a bit off, and so I went out with a level, and it didn't seem to be that far off to me, but I made sure that bubble was dead center on the level, and I don't think I've had problems with precipitation readings since that point. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I'll put on my action item. Cheryl, you can have your own conversation, but I'll follow up. I won't, I'll just say I'm getting feedback about read switches or the rain gauges on some new stations. Do you have any insight on this? Have you been seeing any patterns? And I don't know what I'll get back, but
Okay. And thanks for that. Some of it might be after they've been in, and all my stations have been in for a year or a couple of years, except for that new one that I replaced. I think it was last March or something like that. And then switched out the other station that was also having, anyway, I switched out the station that was having the read problem with the repaired station. And it could be that, maybe the ground has shifted a little bit or something like that. So the stations that are having problems, if I can't get out there individually, I will ask the growers or collaborator to go out the level and check that and make sure that it's right. I know that when we installed them, we did just that. We put levels on the top of the rain gauge to make sure everything was level. And that the poles were all level and all that kind of stuff, but they can certainly shift over time. So I'll check on that as well.
Yeah, and it is springtime. I'm sure everybody's double checking, but just look inside the bucket, make sure there's not a spider web in there or something, or a giant hornet's nest or anything like that. It's a little bit early for hornets, but yeah, these buckets are tricky. So I think we have a plan though. I'll get on that on my end, and then Carol, if you learn anything else, we can just follow up offline.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question. Is there, do we have like a paragraph or something that we could send out to our users? I don't know if we have an article that's been written on spring maintenance or anything like that.
Yes, we do. I have a blog article that I put out every spring. Let me see if.
Very confusing for me.
But yes, we have that language, so I'll send that to the group.
Yeah, and
well,
if you're okay with it, I'll just put it in our Ohio Fruit newsletter.
Yeah.
Of course, you would get the credit. And I would just say taken from and link to it.
Yeah, of course, that's no problem at all. Okay, so share maintenance.
Can whoever's talking in the background mute?
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else. Are there other items of importance that we should discuss now? If not, I probably won't get these notes up until Monday, along with the recording. But other than that, I think we're all set for today. Unless you have questions. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks. All right. Bye.